All right. Are we waiting for our participants to come in? Oh,
we're good.
And are we recording? I don't know if that's something that okay, great. So we've got all the bases covered. All right, well, I want to welcome everybody to the Prospect Theater. This is the Prospectus Women in Theater. And we have a probably about 90-minute panelist discussion about women in theater. And I'll tell you a little bit more about the purpose and the scope of our conversation. But first, a few key details. First off, myself, I'm Carrie Bullock. I'm a faculty librarian at Merced College, and I'm a huge arts enthusiast. So I'm very honored to be moderating our discussion tonight. And I'm joined by amazing, amazing women, artists, makers, creators, and you'll get to know them much better in just a minute. First, just a couple of housekeeping. Since we're on Zoom, if you're not speaking, go ahead and mute. It just makes for everything to be a little bit clearer. Great. And then if you have questions, if the audience has questions, if I think for our panelists, if you want to talk, go ahead and unmute yourself and then step into the conversation, and we'll keep it organic and conversational. But for anybody that is watching live during the live stream, please go ahead and put your questions in the Zoom chat. And then our fabulous behind the scenes, Andrew Brown will get those questions to me and I can ask our panelists, okay? And if there's time or the modality allows for it, then maybe we'll open it up for like a Q&A at the end. Okay, so let's scope this conversation. So women in theater, what exactly are we taking a look at tonight? So we think about bias. And tonight we're all about surfacing biases in theater at all levels, from acting, playwriting, producing, directing, from the front of the house to the back. Women have been and are systematically marginalized. That is a problem. That's a real problem. It is real, and especially when we're talking about art, representation, narratives, stories, these all matter. We've seen that it matters time and again. It's our history. It's our understanding of the world. So we need to talk about it. We need to make it an issue, and we need to do it on a local level. It's an international problem, but how can we face it locally? And what are maybe some of the constructive suggestions that we can implement now? So we need to do the important work of dialogue and discussion, because things never change until we realize that they need to be changed. When you don't talk about it in an accessible way, it looks like there isn't a problem, and then the women are blamed for there being a problem. So we need to make the invisible or the systematic bias, we need to make that visible, and we need to talk about it in a few different ways. So let's frame it in the scope of gender parity. So let's also look at it by a little bit of a few statistics, some breakdown. The count, which is a important women-driven and gender parity initiative. During the 2014-2015 breakdown city by city, Los Angeles, out of 74 productions that they were surveyed, only 23% were works written by women. Chicago was the highest, with out of 120 plays, 36% of those works were written by women. We also see that our audiences, our audience are 65% women. So, you know, the majority of our ticket holders, our ticket buyers are women, but cast-wise, 39% of the actors are women, 36% are directors, and 28 are plays that are written by women. So we see this real kind of disconnect about who the audience is and what's being produced. So male playwrights write 37% parts for women, and female playwrights write about 60% for women's casts. Critics award 4- and 5-star ratings to plays with casts of their own gender. And male directors and writers command bigger stages and higher ticket prices. So we also see this throughout history, that there's been women playwrights, but we just haven't seen them given a voice, at least that I can think of. So what I think is a very good metaphor is this idea of the glass curtain. Okay, so women are getting stuck behind the proverbial glass curtain. So what can we do about it? So tonight I'm going to introduce us to our esteemed panelists, and we're just going to have a conversation. We're going to talk about it. All right, so let me start by introducing Tracy Skye-Sprague. Tracy is earned her bachelor's degree in drama from CSU Stanislaus. She studied crafting political theater in San Francisco Mime Troupe, Viewpoints with Alexandra Billings, and improv with Sills Spallman Theater Works. And I'm going to apologize right now if I butcher a bunch of names. I really apologize. I did my best to figure out how to pronounce everything before. She has directed and performed locally at Prospect Theater Project, Center Stage Conservatory, great theater, Stage 3, Merced Shakespeare Fest, Murphy's Creek Theater, Phoenix Collective, and Shakespeare on the Vine. She also does a youth theater conservatory, and that's dedicated to the classics, and workshops at the Stanislaus County Schools. All right, welcome Tracy. Okay, Tara, and I just want to make sure, is it Tara? Great, thank you. Tara is the founding artistic director of Shakespeare on the Vine Theater Company in Murphys. She has directed Macbeth, The Tempest, Hamlet, As You Like, and The Taming of the Shrew. She is also in her 5th season with Oregon Shakespeare Festival as their company manager. Her theater credits as a director, producer, and manager spanned over the last decade, including Marin Theater Company, International Festival of Arts and Ideas, Long Wharf Theater, Huntington Theater, and many more. She currently studies Shakespeare Studies adjunct professor. Oh, sorry. She is currently a Shakespeare Study adjunct professor at Southern Oregon University. Okay. Hi, Tara. Nice to have you. Moving on to Karen. Karen Heidelbeck, originally from the Central Valley, is an assistant professor of acting and directing at the theater department at CSU Stanislaus, where she teaches all levels of acting and directing, in addition to directing in the program production. She has a bachelor's in drama from CSU Stanislaus and received her graduate acting training from the theater school at Chicago's DePaul University. She has also studied at the British Theatre in Richmond College in London and earned her Master's of Fine Arts in Theatre with a concentration in performance and directing from Humboldt State University. I also want to mention that Karen was my colleague at Merced College, but she's also been involved with the Prospect Theater, Phoenix Creative Collection, Center Stage Conservatory, CSU Stanislaus, and the Merced Shakespeare Fest. So welcome, Karen. All right, Jeanette Farr Harkins. Hi, Jeanette. So Jeanette Farr, a playwright and actress originally from Turlock, California, is a graduate of California State University Stanislaus and holds an MFA in theater arts with an emphasis in playwriting from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, UNLV. Her plays have been produced around the world, including the Edinburgh Festival Fringe in Scotland. Her work has been recognized by the Nevada Arts Council, the Kennedy Center American College Theater Festival, and the Association for Theater in Higher Education. Her plays continue to yield performances at high schools, forensics competitions, community and professional theaters across the United States and abroad. An alumnus of the Kennedy Center Summer Playwriting Intensive, Jeanette is a proud member of the
Antias, yeah.
Thank you, Antias Playwrights Lab, the Playwrights Union, and the Dramatists Guild of America. All right, welcome, Jeanette.
Thanks.
Marika Beck. Marika Beck is an actor, director, theater professor, and writer with certifications as a yoga instructor, Fitzmaurice voice work associate teacher, Reiki master, and energy medicine practitioner. In her 25 years as an actor, she has worked in film, television, theater, with live theatrical performance being her passion. She has been the originator and founding member of 2 professional theater companies, the Grab has 20 years of academic theater experience, serving on faculty and directed productions, taught countless workshops on characterization, transformation, Shakespeare, physical theater, performance devising, voice, movement, and speech. And welcome, Marika. Okay. All right, so lastly, before we start getting into the questions, I just want to take a quick moment and thank Jack Souza for instigating this discussion and gathering together a bunch of fabulous, sparkling minds. I'm really so excited to be in such great company. So I really hope to take a back seat and let this conversation grow organically. And as we, as you tune in and zoom in to watch, that theater is a very sacred, safe space. And we wish we could be in person right now doing what we love, but we can't yet. So right now we're going to broaden our minds intellectually by discussing these very important topics. All right. So some of my opening question is, I think what we'll do is maybe give everybody a chance to comment on the issues of narrative. So let's talk about women narratives and women voices. What models or inspiration do you draw to build your own unique voice? And are there any particular genres you lean toward? Anything that you'd like to open up talking about maybe women's narratives and voice?
I'll jump in. As a playwright and educator, I teach at Glendale College. I think it's really important because we're so steeped in learning about the origins of theater, as starting with the Greeks rather than exploring which was a male-dominated culture. And so we tend to get later on into those voices and women playwrights. And I'll add also playwrights of color later on in the contemporary canon. So, I guess how can we bring that to the forefront and forward is certainly the awareness. So I'm so appreciative that we're having this conversation. The old adage of write what you know. But even as a playwright in my earlier crafting, I was a really good mimic rather than finding my voice. And I have to give tons of props to people like Paula Vogel and Marcia Norman, and even some of the other women playwrights who continue to lift me up, not only set as an example, but to bring me into a group or a theater company. I think that's really important to show that we exist. And then once we're there, to lend a hand to help others, either by having them as a speaker and as an example, bringing them into the classroom through a reading assignment, and introducing to show that, hey, we're here. Personal narratives, I think that's evolved over time. And not to let too much out of the bag, Karen, but Karen Heidelbeck and I are working on a project now together where we are examining Henrik Ibsen, and a descendant of Hedda Gabler, and with mad respect for a known feminist, but it is still a male narrative. So we're playing with that a little bit, and in a sense reclaiming that to present something new so that it still respects and honors a road that was paved by Ibsen, but coming from a female collective here in presenting a story that feels female. It's about caregiving and women in science, which isn't traditional. So really excited about that and where things are going with that. Whether it'll be produced, we can talk about that too.
Yeah, we will.
I'll jump in. I was just thinking about, where I teach, or I produce a lot of plays that would be considered classics in the canon, and I have a distinct fondness for adaptations of those works and looking at them in new ways, and from very often the female perspective. I'm getting ready to film, since we can't do theater, a version of Antigone called Antigone X at Stanislaus this spring, looking at that particular play from the vantage point of war and refugees and their experiences all over the world. The play by Paula Sismar, that's an adaptation of the story with a little bit of different ending. Also, which is the wonderful thing I like about it. It doesn't go along the track that Sophocles set up for Ismene. So she's branching out a little bit in this play. So, but I'm so curious of the thousands of years of female playwrights that we're not able to read, because those
Yeah.
those plays are lost, or they were burned, or they were destroyed purposefully because women had the audacity to write. And I'm always sort of drawn to that, wondering what's out there when I'm looking at the classics. And so I very often myself turn to adaptations of those classics in order to get different perspectives, and particularly the female perspective. I do have to give props to Euripides for daring to create a tragic heroine in Medea. Yay. But still, yeah. I wish we could find all of those manuscripts that are buried out there. As far as personal narratives for me, it's that's kind of ironic in that I absolutely love the absurdists. That's something that Tracy and I have in common, a shared love for the absurdists. Well, Jeanette too. And most, good portion of those are so male driven that, it can be frustrating. So classics, adaptations of those classics, and also, of course, new work, because it's up to us to continue, especially in the universities and the small theaters in the world, because it's very difficult to put up a new play, a new narrative on a Broadway stage. It just doesn't happen very often anymore, unless, of course, as Carrie expressed with those statistics, which are just mind-boggling, that it's still, I guess that was 2015. It's still 6 years ago. So,
and I will say that even what's being produced, if it gets produced, often have a trauma narrative behind it, which I'm even examining in my own work. I think we're certainly write what you know, right? But when we keep perpetuating the idea that women as victims, I think we may have a problem with that, because if we're seeing all of these narratives, and film too has those, then it doesn't necessarily raise us up. So ideas of women in science, the non-traditional roles, which is also matching in the theater's workplace. I'm in a women in theater group on Facebook, and occasionally I'll see things that just still blow my mind, that here's the first professional woman tech director in the history of tech directors. Like, we don't often think of, when we're in a theater, those roles, or lighting designers. It's the world is changing, and it's very exciting. But we have to check in with our own biases too, I believe.
I was going to add to that. Pre-pandemic, I was able to attend a conference in New York at the National Disability Theater. And one of the topics we discussed a lot is that disabled actors are often put in plays that just promote more ableism, and that they're craving, of course, being cast in any role that doesn't require their disability to be part of the spotlight. And I think that the same narratives for women, it's the same problem with women, right? It's just like Jeanette was saying, trauma is a topic, or victimism, or sexism, or she's the classic, power woman, and she, there's these like tropes that women are portrayed as in characters, and breaking away from that is so important. And to echo what Karen said, adaptations of classics is where we often go to just, we want these like different characters, powerful male characters, and to flip the traditional casting, give those characters to women. And I do that a lot in my work, and I find that although that's very fulfilling, it's also frustrating that I have to take the male written work, particularly works of Shakespeare, and then think of conceits that are hopefully really artistically engaging, but that include non-traditional casting, that flip the binary, and then you're confronted with an audience who wants to engage with you on a sexist level in that conversation, or well, that just doesn't really work for me because that's a man, it's supposed to be a man and you gave it to a woman. Like, well, let's unpack that. Why can't a woman go through the same foibles as a man? And so when we were looking for new plays and new works written by women, looking for those biases to sort of be shed away and show and unpack women as they are is really important.
Yeah, and it's interesting too that there's a belief out there that women don't want to watch female imperfect characters. That audiences are okay watching imperfect male characters, but that this vast majority of women who are in the audience, 60% as the statistics say, don't want to watch female stories. And I just don't think that's true. I think we've been led to believe that.
I can jump right in there on that too and say that I in the summer of 2019, I was lucky enough to perform the Arkadna role in an adaptation, a sort of new work of The Seagull. And while I think people did want to engage and witness a story of an incredibly imperfect female, I was fascinated by how truncated and compartmentalized those responses were too. The way the filter is built to absorb those stories, where this character that I was playing was just categorized as a bitch, and as an actress for 25 years, you were either, for me, because of the way I look and sort of how I was stereotyped, I was going up for roles that were either the bitch or the whore, these kind of narrow categories that I think is part of, it sort of felt like a personal narrative that was forced upon me, where it was like, this is the game. So you get to choose whether you're going to play the game or not. And like you were saying, Tara, you sort of have to remember the way people are taking it in, not just the way you want to put it out. But I think that's something to be sort of smashed through as well, that we just have to keep pushing the new narrative with either adaptations, because it gives people an opportunity to look differently, or to just hopefully acknowledge the way they are seeing something as less complex, maybe even less human, because it's female.
I think I'd like to, as an outsider, I would like to know just a little bit more about adaptations, because that is a really common, for example, the Shakespeare, and then having an all-female cast. And I mean, in the back of my mind, I think, why? Like, why do we? There's lots of great work out there, but anyway, why we have to like reimagine a male lens or reimagine male work? I don't know. I would like to know more about these all female cast readaptations.
Well, I can answer that too. I'm sure Tracy and Tara and Marika too, I'm sure you can answer this as well. But I think, starting with an adaptation, you're starting with material that people already know. And that they're going to be comfortable with it. And you have a sense also that it's going to sell, because we live in a capitalist society, and it's important that we make a little bit of money on our plays. And when doing new work, it's often a challenge because you don't know if your play is going to be one that people are going to want to come see. So
So
it's
there's
very
that
often
brand, there's
sorry.
like brand recognition.
Yeah, I think so. And I also think that with regards to adaptations and you know, flipping gender or you know, color conscious casting, that you're getting people to see an old idea in a new way. And for some reason, audiences tend to take that a little easier. It's a little easier for them to make that leap, rather than being confronted with something that is very new and may take them to take them to a place where they might become defensive. It's a little easier to get your point across with something that's either funny or familiar. And so sometimes, you know, an adaptation of a classic is a good way to do that, because it's the audience already understands the original convention. And so when you change the convention as a director, then they go, oh, okay, well, I can make a little bit of an adjustment to watch this, and they'll be able to take in the themes in a different way.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if Tracy if you wanted to say a little bit about maybe what drives your point of view, your narrative, or inspirations for your unique voice.
I'm kind of in like a slightly different boat from everyone, just because running a small basement theater has afforded me different opportunities, because it's like a nice small space, and it's really allowed me to produce newer work by young women dealing with issues that are really relevant right now today, which has been a real pleasure. But on the flip side of that, then I'll do an all-female Shakespeare production as well, which really empowers women to get to take on these roles that we weren't afforded for so many years. I've never seen anyone as excited about a role as a woman playing one of Shakespeare's men. And they feel like the luckiest person in the world. And that really inspires me, is when I work with artists that feel so lucky to be able to do this work that they haven't been able to do, even though it's hundreds of years old. And so things like that have been really motivating for me. But yeah, like I'm really inclined to like very modern, contemporary plays written by young women, dealing with issues that are very like present now, and allowing us to have the dialogue about what's going on right now, right here. But like on the flip side of that, I get a lot of, why aren't you doing shows for men, with roles for men? And I'm like, really? There's so many shows going on with roles for men. Why are you asking me to do that? I do that. It might be written by a woman.
I'm the artistic director, that's why.
Right. Like it actually surprised me. I thought everyone would be excited about all these roles for women, plays about women, women playing Shakespeare. Like, how fun is that? But then I get like the opposite reaction for men. You're generally not women, at least not to me. But yeah, it really surprised me when I was approached about not providing opportunity for men, and then I had to like basically direct them to other theaters that had plenty of opportunity for men, and like just explain that I do shows that have men in it too. You know, it's they're still there. So that's like one of the interesting things that I deal with, as you know, choosing to do plays written by women, plays that deal with women issues. I've done a lot of new plays written locally by women, as well as devised pieces. We did this one devised piece where it was women dealing with their relationship with their bodies. And then I would get like responses from the audience. Why can't you do that about men? I want to see what feelings men have about their bodies. And I was like, really? We've been listening to that for years.
Yeah, I'm so interested in this idea of well, when we were talking before we began, we were thinking about the ways that women support or the expectations, but we can get to that in just one moment. I wanted to also say, Tracy, I love your little theater because I've seen some of my most contemporary plays at your spot. So I like that you are always kind of doing more new, not always the classics. So I appreciate that. Okay, so I want to talk just a little bit more about gender parity, the idea of if you can share any experiences where either in your role as a teacher, your role as a producer, your role as an actor, where you did experience either you were undermined by a colleague, or you didn't feel like you got the trust from your actors. Can you provide any experiences to help us think about gender parity in theater?
I think we really looked at our season first and foremost, and even with 2 full-time faculty, we're a very small department, but even with full-time faculty, we looked and we realized, like, wow, what did we just choose and why did we choose it? And then made a commitment to incorporate a full season that contained female playwrights or devised creations from our faculty. And so it even surprised us when the count came out, and then we made it our mission to give this a go. So, I mean, I can say that was supported primarily because we were the ones making the season. And so, yeah, I don't think that there was any pushback with that, but I imagine that there are in places where the staff is not on board with that. But I think it happens regardless of who our leadership is or what that leadership is made up of. Sometimes it still happens that we've chosen 3 plays that are not diverse or where everyone isn't invited to the table. So that was a big learning experience for me and my colleagues.
I haven't often felt that I've had that, with regards to what you were asking, Carrie, that I haven't really necessarily felt that from actors, that they didn't trust me or that they didn't feel comfortable, having a female director. I felt it more on the technical side of theater, because as a director, you're typically collaborating with designers, and the vast majority of designers are men. And I've been really lucky to have had a lot of great men to work with. But there have been times when I felt like there's an expectation that I don't really know anything about lighting design, or that I've never, sat down and drafted, a set, or that I don't know how to call a show. And incidentally, women make the greatest stage managers. Speaking of calling shows, but I have felt it sometimes in academia to a certain extent, but not so much close by in our community, because I think our community, particularly in the Valley, is pretty giving along those lines. But there's often the assumption that because you're a woman that you haven't worked on the technical side of things ever. So that you may not know the difference between the lighting instruments, or how to operate a board, or something to that effect.
So there's an education oftentimes, or an explanation when you may have said the exact same thing 5 minutes ago.
Exactly. Or yeah, and I've seen this when Tracy and I have been wielding hammers at the same time, that people are often like thrown off that that she knows how to put up a platform, that she does it by herself. It's just like, it's not that hard. We can figure it out.
Sure.
Anyway.
Never played that. Women weren't traditionally carpenters, I guess.
No, and they, the stereotype is the one designer that's female is typically the costume designer.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the expectation that, and I know enough about costume design to get by, but I am texture challenged when it comes to clothing. So I don't, but ask me to do a lighting design, and yeah, I'll give it a go. But that's the expectation. I think that's been sort of the stereotype in the past.
Tara, did you want to say anything else on this?
Yeah, I think my colleagues here are being generous, and I think that's lovely, but I think that the level of microaggressions that occur daily for women in any profession, but definitely in theater, cannot be understated. I don't think overt sexism happens in rehearsal rooms, but microaggressions do. And we as women have been training ourselves to push them off and throw them off and not think about them. I often think about how if I have a moment, I can see the judgment quicker. And I think I've seen male directors do this 1,000 times, and they're never going to have that kind of judgment. And those things, I sort of, for any of the male theater folks out there that are listening right now, like those things add up, and they become our armor, and we will see the microaggressions come at us, little comments, little things, or even, Karen's talking about whether they're surprised to see us wielding these hammers. That's a microaggression, right? It shouldn't be surprising. It should be normalized, and we have a long way till we get there. And as a woman who started in leadership roles very young in this industry, the ageism and the sexism combined is so challenging. And I have often worked with older male designers, and there's like strategies you have to come up with to sort of come meet them at the table and try and get on the same page. And women have always talked about, like, I have to wear the suit and be in the boys' club somehow, and like these different strategies that women come up with to sort of get through the day and get through the various levels to be successful and to actually get the work done. Those are constant, being talked at or being talked through or talked down to, or yes, minor comments. And those are the things that, I know that people of color go through this also, as well as women and non-binary folks. And to get that to go away, to be on actual equal playing ground would be incredible.
Thank
Oh
you
my
for
God,
saying that. Thank
Yeah,
you for saying that, Tara.
I couldn't agree more, Tara. And I've experienced so many microaggressions in academia, starting my academic career in the same sort of leadership capacity that you're talking about, starting something as a young or younger, seen as younger female means that you're somehow needing some help. And I've been condescended to and even at one point towered over in a faculty meeting by, an old white male dog that would not have done that to me if I wasn't, a female in her 30s and junior faculty. And I think if I go a step further and I ask myself the question, so what do we do? I think that's why conversations like this are so important, when women actually come together and share those stories and then create a system of support where we can stand up for ourselves with more alliance, with feeling like there are allies, where nowadays if I had that moment with that old dog back again, I would handle it differently, because women are now talking. And there was less of that 20 years ago, when those things first started happening to me in academia. And I think it, like you're saying, Tara, because it's everywhere, it shows up in our stories. If theater is reflecting society back to itself, then there is this symbiotic relationship where we dare to subvert an existing story, or we continue to seek the funding to be able to write new ones. And then we sort of try to smash through that conditioning to compete with each other, and to unify and work together instead.
For me, I feel like how it's shown up the most is like I've had so many more men bail on me, who are supposed to like come in and like maybe do light design or help in other technical aspects, and then just not follow through. And as a result, I would have to come in and do what they had originally agreed to do. And as a result, it's made me more likely to collaborate with women, because I can trust them to get the job done.
These are all so important. Yeah, the idea of microaggressions really make me think about stereotypes, in that they're used to, pigeonhole us, and to frame us in ways that maybe we don't want to be, or we have to accept. What are some of the stereotypes that you feel are maybe the most prevalent, or could be not so obvious, but are actually quite damaging? They're maybe more unconsciously biased, or they maybe further that stereotype unwittingly.
Do you mean like hysteria? Like if we're bringing something up that someone would come up, we're hysterical, which of course has an origin in that. Or as Marika said, bitch, if we can say that. Yeah, that
So,
for
Jeanette,
some reason, yeah.
Yeah, just to sort of reflect back to you that bitch thing, it's really a way to try to pour water on very legitimate anger, and that
Anger and getting what we need.
Yeah, and sometimes when you speak nicely, you don't get it. There's oh no, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I apologize. It's just exciting. So I feel like or having to change who we are. In other words, to be nice, to get that prop, or to get, something fixed, that we have to change who we are rather than to simply ask, like maybe our colleagues would.
Yeah, and then if there is a problem, this idea of being of it being sort of assumed that because I'm female, I will be far more forgiving than I will be formidable in a situation where, that ball needs to be picked up. And just because I'm a woman doesn't mean that I'm going to, make you feel better about that in some kind of nurturing way. So this idea of getting what you need sometimes doesn't happen when you just ask.
Yeah, and that just is, it's so frustrating because that's, not your fault. That's the cultural baggage of the other person. But if we're thinking about, I like this quote, and I think it's that idea of the stereotyped bitchy or domineering woman, whereas male directors or male leaders are often, this characteristic is seen as clear and decisive and strong. So this treatment of women playwrights or producers or stage man or artistic directors, those stereotypes affect all aspects of our ability to be productive, much less, get the roles that you want, or tell the stories, or choose the stories. That's the word I keep hearing so much tonight is choice. Is this choice, this material choice, or getting to choose the topics and the roles that you want to play that are relevant to your age and your experience.
One of the issues, and I guess it's where I am age-wise now, is there's just not a lot. And I think that it's, again, that it's this idea that's ingrained that nobody wants to watch a story about a middle-aged woman, They want to, but, it seems to be that if it's a man, it doesn't seem to matter, what age they are. We'll follow that narrative wherever it takes us, from the youngest, most handsomest 19-year-old man to, a 70-year-old Sean Connery. It doesn't seem to matter for them, but, a 50-year-old mother isn't as interesting, supposedly. And so, there are no roles for me right now. I've got to wait another 10 years till I can play the old biddy, I guess. I don't.
Well, and that's why Beckett is so wonderful, and yay for you for playing Winnie, because there are what I feel are those choice roles. But still, there needs to be. I miss Nora Ephron. I just miss Nora Ephron, and God bless Frances McDormand. Who are taking charge of those narratives. But I agree. They're out there. I want to give a shout out to NPX, New Play Exchange, because as a proud member of the Honor Roll, which is a playwrights advocacy group for women over 50. Yes, I just outed myself as not being a so young playwright. But there is even a bias there of who gets produced and who is considered emerging in the work. So we're out there. We are writing for you. And the New Play Exchange has a ton of plays, which folks don't know. even exists, that maybe it's not the traditional Samuel French or play scripts or dramatist play service, but there's a whole database of writers of various representation and backgrounds who are writing, and you can put in what you're looking for. So I hope folks will check that out.
Yeah, the Kilroys. Actually, I was looking at that earlier today. And the Kilroy list, all of them are coming from MPX, from the new Play Exchange. So many of them are actually published on the site for, all I got to do is sign up to be a reader and to read those. And there's some great scripts. The Kilroys are essentially a list that is working towards parity for women, and also folks on that are non-binary. So it's an interesting list to check out, and they have one every year of plays that are going under the radar, you know, in a national sense, but or locally or regionally thought to be very good. So
many of which have gone through extensive development, but have not received a production. Also with the National New Play Network is a really wonderful organization that's looking at the Rolling World premiere, or at least was looking at the Rolling World premiere. They're going to come back, I know. But again, developed to death without a commitment from a regional theater to produce. And so again, a lot of those stories go under the radar if they're not uplifted and brought to the attention. And a lot of that has to do with the continued leadership at these theaters. I know that many of those are starting to change, so that the artistic leadership, or those who are choosing the plays, are not of one kind of person. And so it's starting. I think we can continue to do better. Thanks for mentioning the Kilroys too, Bud.
Yeah, I just know there's got to be some great work that's being made out there, and I love hearing about these writers. I mean, would there be any suggestions that you could make about how to communicate these new writings? I don't know. How can we put them in front of theaters or students, or
the public?
Make them known? Yeah.
I send them to Jack all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I try.
So we just need to keep pushing. To keep pushing these. If we see something, you see something that you like, push it forward and make suggestions.
Yeah.
Yeah, the visibility. I think that is certainly active. You know, I would challenge artistic directors to bring in a selection committee that includes voices, to also bring these plays forward. We've adopted the New Play Exchange, and it took some convincing, but it was all for an educational institution. I think it was $300 for the year, and that is now available to all of our students on campus, but specifically our Theater 101, so that we can highlight those plays. You know, that wouldn't be in the traditional anthology, which, by the way, often costs our students a ton of money. So here's a low-cost option to get those out there. I also think it's really important, again, for people to see representation of themselves on stage, and the audiences will come if they feel that it's a safe environment and that they can see themselves. So, you know, again, I challenge folks to look at their season and look at the inclusivity, considering that statistic of who comes to the theater and who's actually putting the money into the theaters. Yeah, that would be really awesome to include at least one playwright, female playwright of color, maybe both, like Dominique Morisseau, you know, like do the work, do the work.
Or maybe the whole season.
Hey,
Women in people of color.
that sounds exciting. I mean, what about, I like this idea of the selection committee. What about audience members or subscription season ticket holders? Or what are some ways that the public could get involved? Because obviously they're the ones that are going to come and watch these shows.
I know many folks have done reading series, which are great. It might be fun to sort of flip the script and say, you know what, we're going to do new works on the stage, fully produced, and we'll give the reading series to the quote unquote classics. And so you're not putting the new works by female playwrights or playwrights of color on the back burner. You're putting that front and center and giving the attention to it. I don't know, just a thought.
Oh, that's really interesting. I like this idea. Okay. So we talked a little bit about our choices, theater leadership, making that the woman's voices a little more upfront. But now I think we started to talk a little bit about women helping women. But I think that it's important that we do acknowledge some of those biases. And I had this conversation with Karen earlier in the week, and we were talking about the large percentage of audiences that come to see women. And I asked the question, do women want to see other women's work? I mean, or do they want to see the canon? I feel like that was an interesting topic. Karen and I had a lot to say about it. So I don't know. I thought I would just kind of open that up to you. What sort of expectations do women put on other women?
Something that I was thinking when, in solidarity, I'll just say I'll out myself and put myself in my 50s too. And when Karen was saying, who wants to come see a mom in her 50s, I was thinking, me, I do. And I do think that desire to, like Jeanette was saying, to see ourselves reflected in stories, there's an interesting little knot to untie with just even the way the stories are told from what we consider to be the female perspective, absent male somewhere. Where we're watching women in a story talk about the male gaze from over there, or the trauma story is because of some male over there. And I was so lucky to, in graduate school, to study with Kate Davey and go really deep into feminist theater, women's theater, to mount a production that was originated by the 5 lesbian brothers in New York City. And then also to just stumble into performances in plays like Fefu and Her Friends, where female characters are actually not talking about men somewhere off stage or in the ether, that these conversations are about two people being human, having an experience, and emotions that have nothing to do with the tether that's still connected to either the male gaze or the male story, and that we're just fitting ourselves into it. So I think that's that's huge in terms of what you were saying, Carrie, about how we help each other, is to just keep returning to what we're looking at, and what the lens is sort of doing from the inside, showing itself outwardly too. And then, like Jeanette was saying, just keep pushing the stories, because I do think there's got to be more than just me as this female in her 50s who wants to see more stories about women in their 50s.
And I agree. I'm really intrigued by the idea of disconnecting the male tether, because it does feel like all the women are shown. And I'm sorry, you guys, I was trying to remember the Bechdel test. Sorry, Bechdel. Yeah. Anyway,
Bechdel test.
the Bechdel test, where very few films actually pass, where the main female character is not either pining over or heartbroken or obsessed with a man, that the conversation has nothing to do with a man. So, guess what? That's like 95% of our conversations. I think that the reality of the way that we do interact is quite different from what gets played out on stage. Or maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Were there any other particular to history? So I did want to spend just a little bit of time where we think about all of these, this amazing canon of work that's out there, but also understand that there have historically been women playwrights. I think I saw in the late 1700s London, something around 33 to 50% of all plays produced were written by women. This blew me away. I had no clue that this was true, and that there's long traditions of theater in not just our European canon, but also throughout the world history, that have been erased or excluded from our theater memory, or our what's been the story that's being told. Were there any examples of historical women playwrights that you might share with us?
The first, the one that comes to mind, just thinking outside of the Western canon, the Japanese tradition of kabuki began with the shrine maiden. It began in the shrines with women, and the actual word kabuki. And I'm not a scholar for this by any means, but the original meaning of it was askew theater. It was sort of a bizarre dance theater that happened in, they weren't really brothels, but they were shrine maidens, essentially, that were entertaining men. This is pre-geisha and all of that. So, the government took the model that was so popular and turned it into an all-male art form, and rebranded it kabuki, which means, I believe it means song, dance, skill, is the and that, that happened in about late 1600s, early 1700s, I want to say. And there's histories of things like that happening all over the world. I mean, we Prospectus, the Germanic abbess, who I don't know the year, wrote plays in Latin. that maybe they were performed, maybe they weren't. They're out there in pieces, but there's there's a long history of that happening, and it women making an effort to come out of the shadows, and then essentially in the case of what's the French actress's name in Lauren Gunderson's Revolutionists. She was guillotined. She was an actress and a writer. Yeah, and
I think I might
basically part of the French Revolution.
have
I
down.
don't know.
You
Name
mentioned
is
her
escaping
before.
me.
Mhm.
But yeah. So they guillotined her, and they essentially lit her place on fire. All of her plays gone. And so it's the stuff is there. It just it just needs to be researched and found and put together and adapted, I guess.
Well, and who gets to write the history,
Right. Where who's writing?
and traditionally the text. Mhm.
Yeah.
That-
All of it was cleaned out by the men. Who are these 30% of the? Yeah, there are some texts that we have from the Renaissance that have been written by women, but it's not in any way as much as there supposedly was. And this idea, even with the Greeks, that women didn't go to the theater. I don't know. You're going to have a Dionysian festival in the middle of spring that's all about fertility, and you're not going to invite the women? I don't think so. I mean,
They much prefer to be home.
they were somewhere in that theater. I'm sorry.
Right.
The Buckeye.
But yeah. We're just told all these stories, and we're just supposed to take them for that's what happened. But I don't know.
I think theater would benefit greatly from having and surfacing some of those stories and incorporating them as giving some context to the female voice.
What life was like from their perspective instead of a man's perspective.
Right.
Imagine
right.
that.
I can only imagine that there were some just incredible, strong, beautiful stories that were created that I don't, if they're there at all, they may have been erased completely. I mean, that is one of those unfortunate parts about who gets to write the history books, who gets to make the rules. So I figure we're getting close to the end of our time together, and we did talk a little bit about looking forward, but I wanted to open up. Are there any trends or any? We heard about the new play exchange, Kilroy list. Are there any conversations that are occurring around this issue that didn't really get addressed in the questioning, or you'd like to talk about maybe what you'd like to see in the future? In fact, I was kind of saving this question. What's the question you are most tired of hearing about with regard to marginalized women in theater? So is there just something you're so sick of hearing whenever you bring up this topic? Is there a response that you're tired of hearing? I mean, what's the question?
Yes, I'm very tired of the response, but that's the business.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I usually hear that from men, of course. So that for me is the single most like spine twisting, cringy thing for me, is that it's just a reflex that comes from the deep connection to the realization that change might be uncomfortable. And I think we just have to run at that sucker. So that's what I'm sick of hearing.
Yeah. And Marika, that just felt a little bit like gaslighting right there too. Like,
Oh, totally.
oh, it's your fault. I mean, you just got to get used to it.
It's mansplaining, it's all of that. It's just that, well, that's the business. Well, whose business?
Right. Whose business when it's 70% of the audience is women? I don't know. That statistic I just can't get out of my head. But yeah. Are there any other questions or comments that you are tired of hearing about this issue?
Well, maybe not tired of hearing, but like if you got to have women in the room to make the decisions too. Like I guess I'm tired of hearing like, well, there just wasn't a play by a woman or whatever, and you look at the room and you're like, well, there's like the leadership's men making those decisions. Like, so I think looking at hiring practices, sort of talking about the other side of it, that stuff happens off stage, all of the administration, and particularly in large institutions, that like looking at hiring practices and making sure your candidate pool is diverse and that your questions aren't biased, and that the interview questions, even down to the like requirements and qualifications and skills, making sure those don't have implicit bias, right? And making sure women are in the room. So nothing about us without us.
Say that last part again.
You can't do so, nothing about us without us.
I love that.
You can't choose work that's going to be about women without us being part of the decision at the leadership level, at the director level. So it's not just choose the play that's written by the woman, that has narratives, that have actors that are also there, but it's all the other roles too. To the stage manager. Mm-hmm. If you're really committed, then the person behind the scenes should be female as well. So
yes, I think that implicit bias in language is so hard to ferret out. And then we even think about, reviewers or critics and the way that they talk about women's work. Karen, would you like to say something?
I actually was just noticing Tracy was going to say something. So
for me, I feel like it's getting brushed off as being, oh, well, she does that stuff for women. And so that I get grouped into this small, special little box rather than being a part of the whole.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, I was just thinking that I hear a lot of people say things, with regards to gender parity in the theater, and also evening the playing field for people of color and people of differing abilities, that will go out there and do it. Go out there and do it. Go start your own company. Go, and then Tracy, you get a little bit of backlash for doing that, right? But it's like if it were that easy, if there wasn't bias in the process of renting a space, in the process of getting people to work with you, bias in getting permits, it's so entrenched that I hear people say that. With regards to to women and people of color and differently abled within the theater. And it's just like, if it was that easy, we would have been doing it the whole time. It would have been happening already, right? There's an issue that makes it difficult. What is it? So maybe the institutions that exist already need to make inroads in that way to help to get it to the point where there is some parity. So anyway.
And I in my homework I read about the 50-50 by 2020. So 50% women, 50% male commitment to showcasing half male, half female artists, playwrights, I think it was specific to playwrights. And that initiative, I think that is pretty ambitious and would be a good start. Would anybody else like to comment? I do have one question from from audience member, but if anybody else wants to comment about this, what you're tired about hearing, or
I think kind of piggybacking and riffing on what everyone said, and specifically Karen, is that when this is brought forward or brought up, that somehow we are taking away from or discriminating against a male narrative. And we're bringing it forward to show that everyone is welcome at the table, because we don't feel welcome at the table. And I think that's important, an important distinction to say. We're not canceling the male voice.
Mm-hmm.
Or that's not the intention. The intention is to bring forth.
Well said. Yeah, inclusivity is not exclusivity.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, just canceling the male voice, that just cracked me up. That could be done.
Where would we begin? Oh my gosh. So I want to take a moment, and I have a question from an audience member, Candace. I'd love to hear some works, plays or performances that have been inspiring, impactful to the panelists. So would anybody like to share an inspiring or impactful work?
The work that I was referring to, that I was really fortunate to be a part of with my MFA training, was the play Fefu and Her Friends by Maria Irene Fornes. I also was able to sort of dive into the Baltimore Waltz by Paula Vogel. So I think those are, in terms of female agency, I think those are two works that I would recommend.
Ooh, female agency. I just got goosebumps. I love that. I love the idea of agency.
Yeah, Fefu blew me away too. There was one at the Fountain Theater here in Los Angeles. I haven't been able to keep my mind off of it. Sarah Rule. I'm going to give shout outs to Stephanie Allison Walker, E.M. Lewis, Jennifer Maisel, and the list goes on and on. Becca Brunsetter, Larissa Fasthorse. I'm just so excited anytime I can see them on stage. Audrey Cephaly. I can go on and on. Another thing that I'm just really jazzed about that is becoming more and more of a movement, and that I keep advocating for, is consent. Not only in how we portray our casting notices for female characters or any character, how we're portraying it either on Facebook or in our general notices, and intimacy direction. When I talk about consent, I'm just wild about the work that's being done, which is so important right now, of how we stage intimate moments on stage. So more on that, or maybe that's another panel, but I'm just so jazzed about it.
Yeah, I agree with Jeanette. I'm very happy that that is really coming into the forefront for theater and film and television. That we have, this new position that is teaching, for lack of a better word, how consent is important from the performer's standpoint, and what they're comfortable with performing, and that they agree to what they're performing. In terms of writers that are particularly, I also love Sarah Ruhl. I directed Clean House at Prospect, and done Eurydice, and Ellen McLaughlin was also, when I was much younger, her adaptations of some of the classics, particularly her adaptation of Iphigenia, was very dear to me. Also, Carol Churchill, Vinegar Tom, was formative for me in my education, and the story of the witches in Northern England, and the trauma of that particular era.
Anybody else?
Yeah.
Because I got I got one more question, but please go right ahead, Tara.
I was just going to shout out Christina Anderson and How to Catch Creation. It's a really extraordinary piece, and she's also a classmate of mine from graduate school at Yale, and so I think that's been inspirational to see people that are my age making incredible work. Dominique Morisseau was mentioned earlier, Lauren Gunderson as well. And I just want to shout out to an organization, Play on Shakespeare, commissioned 34 writers and dramaturgs to translate all of the works of William Shakespeare. And that is chock full of women and people of color. And the organization is run by an extraordinary group of women. Louis Douthit is a fierce woman in this industry. And so those that are interested in adaptation of classics and interested in works like that, I want to just give that shout out. That's a huge literal canon you could go look at that have different voices.
Okay, great. I wish that we could continue this conversation, because I feel like this is that scratching the surface. We're just kind of beginning to look at the issues beneath. I have another question from an audience member. I'd love to hear if any of the panelists have advice for young women looking to break into the world of theater.
Do it. You just got to do it. You just gotta go forth. Go forth, young woman.
Yeah, go get it hard. We need you.
And call out those microaggressions. Call
out the
out
microaggressions, and embrace. Find a mentor. Find a mentor who can guide you in that, because that's always great. Someone to confide in and talk with, and know that who you are in your embodiment has a ton of superpowers and gifts. One of my favorite superpowers is that I'm a nurturer and a caretaker, and I own that, and I embrace that as being so essential in the theater. And I know a couple of folks here who are the ear to listen. That's one of the reasons why I think stage management is perfect, because you're a rock, and you are a leader and take it all on. And as directors too, kind of learn it all and discover it all, and the rest will emerge. But putting yourself in the shoes of everyone is a wonderful gift. I'm sorry, Karen, go ahead.
No, it's okay. I was just thinking that theater doesn't need to be, or I shouldn't say just theater. Art doesn't need to be a painful process. There's this expectation, I think, when going into the arts as a way of life or as a career, that it needs to be hard and you need to struggle and it's okay for people to treat you like crap because that's the way it is. It doesn't have to be that way. And don't allow it to be that way. You know, my every time I go into starting a new project, I want to give space for failure and succeeding and all of those things, and students or actors, you know, if they're professionals, to learn and grow. And it doesn't need to be this horrible place where people are abused and criticized and beaten down over the years. It just doesn't need to be that anymore.
Wow, these are such great comments. I have another audience question if you guys don't mind sticking around a little bit longer, yeah? And if anybody wants to say anything more about opening, how a young woman can break into the world of theater. So Molly asks, is there any way y'all can think of what would qualify theater as a feminist, on feminist grounds? So I think Molly is saying what elements about theater could we look through like a feminist lens? Would anybody like to take that one on?
Well, I think I could just maybe move that needle forward a little bit, simply because I know I've mentioned the phrase in some of my contributions this evening. So I think one of the most important things, I went to go listen to a talk that Gloria Steinem gave just a couple of years ago. And one of the things that she was really adamant about was to clarify that feminism is not anti-male. And so to recognize that to sort of use the term feminist theater, I think it's a very broad term, but the way I would sort of answer that question is to say that it truly is a system of equality and inclusivity. And because of the word feminist, we're sort of shining that light on the female experience. But it's really indicative of just I think also a recognition that, like we've also talked about tonight, that stories need to be inclusive in the way they represent everyone. We need to hear all the stories, not just the ones that are sort of told through a very narrow lens.
Yes, I agree that the term feminism has been sort of, it's taken on almost a negative connotation these days. But don't be afraid of it.
And I would add too that I think that, you know, the act of collaboration, which is so grounded or is necessary for theater, even more so than any of the other arts, is just feminine in nature. You know, that idea of women sitting around and crafting stories, or, you know, working on whatever it was that they were working on as a group, that sort of communal you know, nature of theater, it feels very feminine to me. Which is maybe why 60% of the people in the audience are women, because they want to commune too. But you know.
And one of our jobs as theater practitioners, I believe, is to raise awareness that, you know, yes, we're watching stories, and yes, there's the entertainment, but I really like the plays with purpose, something that has an issue at hand. And I think that there's a wonderful, ripe opportunity to have some theater advocacy in that. And I know, Tracy, that's near and dear to your heart as well. To say something with either with our company or to raise awareness about an issue that it doesn't stop when the curtain goes down, that you leave the audience something so that they can take it and change what the play was about this, and it gets them to say vote, or it highlights an issue that is really important through a feminist lens.
Oh, another question. I think you'll like this one. Do you feel that you get roles outside of the lover/matriarch, virgin/whore dichotomies? Can we take roles out of those dichotomies through dramaturgy? I do love this idea of dichotomies.
Well, I work on that all the time. Like, I'm questioning, I've heard the Bechdel test. I will go back in some of my earlier work and go, wow, would this pass? And maybe not. And just the awareness of it is making me think differently on what roles that I write. I know that for women. And that could be considered challenging what was traditional or a specific role. I won't say my acting days are over, but I am much more comfortable as a writer and writing for women these days.
I have found in comedy pieces in particular that you can highlight those stereotyped caricatures in a way that, I mean, it's a tricky balance, but to try and highlight it and to put it on a platform enough to see, like, look how gross this is, right? To try and get at it in a comedic way, and that I have found to be sort of successful in alleviating the pressures of those topics and sort of put it in a comedic spin, take those dichotomies that the audience member was talking about, highlighting them in a really kind of maybe icky way or comedic crazy way, and then hopefully that breaks open the conversation afterward. I have found that to be a fairly successful route to get to that.
Definitely a lot of expertise in this room. Yeah. Anybody else want to comment? I think if that's all, that was our last audience question. So unless there were any last minute comments or questions from the panelists, I think we can wrap up. So once again, thank you to everybody that zoomed in tonight for the Prospectus Women in Theater. And thank you so much to every single one of our panelists, Tracy Sprague, Karen Heidelbeck, Tara Caton, Marika Beck, and Jeanette Farr Harkins. Y'all were amazing. I'm so happy that I got to meet you. And I hope, you got through me stumbling through some of these questions, because these are really, I mean, there's just no way to ease into a topic like this without it feeling personal, like without it feeling like a very, there's emotions that are tied up in this, and when we critically examine our own biases, I mean, it's hard work. You have to do that hard work first of critically examining your own shit before you can, really engage in this. So I thank you all so much for allowing me to be part of that journey. So
well, thank you. I think we're all asking the right questions, and as long as you're continuing to be curious, that would be the last thought that I would give to everyone in the audience. I'm so in awe with the fellow panelists as well and getting to know you. So thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, you fabulous people.
Thanks for
Can't wait till
watching.
we can all meet